Hello and welcome to Cannabis Marketing Live. I'm Kendra Losey, your host of Cannabis Marketing Live, all puff, no fluff. I am here today with Adelia Carrillo, and she is the CEO and founder of DCN, Direct Cannabis Network. Welcome, Adelia.
Hi, thank you for having me today. I'm really honored to be here.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have Adelia here. I don't know. So the first time I actually saw Adelia, I saw her speak at it was the pitch session, I believe, at the end of Canopy. And I've seen her speak so many times in the past year, almost 2 years now, year and a half, I would say. And it's been awesome to watch her business evolve as she has been working on so many different things and talking to so many different entrepreneurs. So I wanted to bring her on to share her expertise with us today. So welcome. Really excited to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in cannabis?
Yeah, so first things first, I always consider myself a patient first before I even, consider myself an entrepreneur in the cannabis space. So like many others, I consumed cannabis when I was younger, but I definitely did not have the knowledge of the medical benefits at all. It wasn't until about 4.5 years ago when I had to face my own physical, personal health issues. My fiance and I found out that I was pregnant, and it was exciting, but it quickly turned into kind of worry. I was put into bed rest, and then within a few days after, I actually was rushed to the emergency room, and I had to have an emergency surgery. And then, of course, after the surgery, the doctors give you, a cocktail prescription of sorts and tell you to get better. I didn't get better. I was just always sick. I couldn't get up. I was always dizzy. Just the medicine was just too strong for me. So Ali, my fiance, suggested, why don't you try cannabis? And I laugh about it now, and I always tell people this because this part of the story, because of how naive I was, and it's okay. I literally looked at him, started laughing, and just said, why? So I could get the munchies. Like, that's what I knew. You smoke, you get the munchies. And so that obviously changed once I realized the real benefits that cannabis can bring. And it changed me in so many different ways, from the emotional aspect of everything I was going through and even the physical pain. And that's really where the journey began for cannabis. Then that's when I started researching cannabis in the areas that I like. I come from the consumer electronic industry, so I was always around tech, startups, and innovation. And I wanted to find that in this space. I wanted to find these entrepreneurs, find these startups, find this cool innovation that's happening. And there was no real ecosystem. So that was really when that aha moment came. And now we are here to where DCN has evolved.
That is awesome. Now, one of the things that I love about what Adelia does, and that's why I wanted to bring her on, is one, she has an incredible background, but two, she also has the added benefit of interviewing entrepreneurs in cannabis all the time, which, not to like compare you to people, but I almost feel like in that regard, it's like the Tim Ferriss model, right? Like, you're learning all of this information and now you get to share it with us. So in that regard, there's a few things that we're going to be talking about today. One is why it's critical to remember your why. So in marketing and in business, there's this whole trend about what is your why. Can you start off by telling us a little bit about what that means to you?
Yeah. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a story of looking at it from our aspect from DCN. When we first came into this space, I was very mindful that I was coming into a community, that has been underground for a very long time. So many individuals have risked their lives. So many are still locked up for many of the things so many of us are doing and now making money on. And I wanted to make sure that DCN represented those stories and the journeys of each of these entrepreneurs, who decided to risk their career, risk their lives for this plant. So for us, the why is important to showcase, because if we continue to show this why everybody's doing what we're doing in the cannabis industry, it can really help build the morale and the foundation of the cannabis industry as a whole. So I know your question is kind of more generalized. This was really more specific to the cannabis space and why it's important to discuss the why we all have.
Absolutely. So can you break it down for people in terms of what does that why mean to you as a definition? Because I do want to get circled back to what you just said, because I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
But I want to just like the larger definition of what you feel like that means and why it's important as part of for entrepreneurs to have.
Yeah. So for entrepreneurs and businesses, the understanding of the why for your company is something that you're always going to fall back on. It's why you do what you do. Every time you feel like giving up, every time you feel that, you're having that self-doubt moment, or you're going through those startup hurdles that we all face every day, that is something you're going to look at. You're going to remember the why you're here. So the why is going to help you describe your business, why you do it, why it's needed. And that is something you can present to other people, but then it's also something that you and your team can look at and remind you why you're here and why you're doing what you're doing.
And what I've seen is that companies that are able to articulate that both internally to amongst their team as well as to their external to their clients and customers, they tend to be more successful because you almost have that rallying cry around what you're doing as a business. How do you have examples of companies in the cannabis industry that are doing that well?
Yeah, I think that's one thing I'm realizing a lot about the cannabis space. A lot of people actually have a why, and you can really look at it as aligning with your values and almost mission statement as well. But a perfect example, one that I really find does it well, is Papa and Barkley. The founder, he is a son who had, the founder, he had a father, who had a lot of, I guess it was mobilizing back pain, and it caused a lot of, concern. And that's really kind of what the idea evolved for Papa and Barkley. He wanted to provide medicine that his father could take and it could help him. The story is really where the essence evolved. He had a mission. He wanted to help his father. And then that began to play into what Papa and Barkley does. So you look at it with their team. They made sure to build a team that consists of caregivers, scientists, and professionals. And they also are on the same mission, which is to unlock the power of cannabis and to improve people's lives. They even correlated that with their products. The thing when looking at their products are not intimidating at all. It's something that I know I can recommend to my parents, my in-laws, relatives, and people that may be kind of intimidated by cannabis. And so it really consumes from, the reason this idea evolved into the people he surrounded himself with, and now into the products that they're presenting out there. And it just goes full circle, and it shows in, just looking at their packaging and the stories they tell and the marketing that they have created around their brand. So yeah, they're a good one.
That is a good one. And the interesting thing about what you just said that I think is so important, is that it didn't start with what their products can do.
No.
Right? It didn't start with the features or benefits or why you need to buy their product. Mm-hmm. It's why they created their company in the first place. And I think that's just so powerful. Side note, Chelsea's here. She says hi, as well as Michael Evans waved too. So there's a few people here. Shout out and let us know also where you guys are watching from and viewing from. Throw in your questions for Adelia as we go through. There's some, we have some set questions here, but happy to throw in some curveballs for her.
I love curveballs. The one thing though, I did make a note on that. Everybody's why may not be similar to Papa and Barkley. It may not be similar to DCN. It really goes into what you're doing and the problem that you're solving and why you're doing it. So, you can look at everybody's why, but always really look at what you're doing within your own company and what you guys are trying to accomplish. And then create that why around that, not around what other people's whys are because you think you may have to have that kind of why. It's not like that at all. You need to look at what you're doing and the value you're bringing.
Right, absolutely. So it doesn't necessarily require a near-death experience. It doesn't require severe parent pain.
Yeah.
It's a very personal reason that becomes professional, but at the same time, there is something more to be said for that, especially in this industry. And you brought up a really, really important point as well, is that all of the work that people have done over the years in that black market. And there's the dealers and all the different levels, right? But there's also the people who've been advocating for this for decades to be able to bring us to where we are today.
Exactly.
And that's a huge industry why that I think is really important that it doesn't get lost in everyone rushing to the industry.
Yep. Very
true. Is that respect in that larger framework that we're all working within. Because something just, cannabis didn't become legal in California just because we asked for it, right? There's been decades of work. Because if so, that would have happened a long time ago.
Exactly.
And so that's really, really important when we start to look at the different elements that go into it. So you mentioned DCN and how you started in your aha moment. Is that story what you consider your why? What would you say your why is that you share with employees and customers and potential clients as you're working with different companies?
Yeah, so the why for me is definitely different than the why for DCN. When looking at our business, we're here to provide an ecosystem for the entrepreneurial community. That ecosystem is going to provide a voice for the startups, a platform for the professionals, and a community for the entrepreneurs. So our why is to really help build a positive influence in the foundation of the cannabis industry as it evolves. This is one thing I can go on that I guess, again, another one of those passion moments. We have the opportunity to make this industry a role model industry. I really believe that. I really feel that we can build the foundation of this industry better than any other industry out there. And that then can help other industries change their values, change their principles, of how companies are built, how brands are built, and how humans and businesses can, really start to work together in a different way. So that's like really that big consumption of why we do what we do at DCN.
Awesome. But then you have your personal motivations too, and your personal why. And I think that all of that's really, really important because it's not always the easy industry, right? There are so many regulations. There are so many stereotypes. There's not just you enter it and make money, right? So, exactly. so that's where the why is really important because it keeps people motivated, to Talia's point, moving forward. Which I think takes us to the next point that we were talking about today, which is how important is it to face your fears as an entrepreneur? So I think the baseline is that we all have fears and they're going to be different for everybody, right? You're going to run into public speaking or whatever, what sales, but whatever it is. So what, and I don't know if people admit this to you when you're interviewing them, but would you say that you see any trends in terms of the fears that you hear from entrepreneurs as you're talking to them? Is there any common themes there?
Yeah, there's actually quite a few. And you're right. A lot of them, I don't necessarily will put all that out for them, like in the interviews. It's something more that we do offline and connect with because at the end of the day, we're all entrepreneurs. We're all doing this together and we can learn from each other. But so when speaking with a lot of these entrepreneurs, I found a few common areas that they are fearful in, which I also include myself of having these certain fears. One, the fear of failure. Two, the fear of the unknown or the uncertainty. And then three, the fear of going in the wrong direction. The last one I actually have an example for. I was on a call recently with a gentleman and he was actually afraid of choosing the wrong demographic for his product. And, as we started discussing, it made me realize quite a few things. We're all moving so fast as we build our businesses and we wear so many hats that sometimes your target audience can kind of get lost in that, So, you may start to steer in the wrong direction and now you have this product that you're putting in front of the wrong audience completely and it's not going to work, which then in turn, you're going to be burning cash. then in turn, now you're worried about paying your bills for the company, so it's the fear of the wrong direction one, I think was interesting to hear. But it was also a good reminder because our target audience, that's why, again, we do what we do. And if we're not in front of them selling our product, we're not making business. We don't have a business, you know, we're not making money. We're not providing a need to the right people. So yeah, those are the three: fear of failure, fear of unknown and uncertainty, and then fear of moving in the wrong direction.
And those are all huge and so important. And I think your fear of moving in the wrong direction is really, really key. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Especially like the money that can be burned trying to build a brand around something for a product that you're targeting for, you know, baby boomers that might be actually for millennials or, you know, other way around.
Yeah. And it's okay but it's okay. It's going to happen, but just recognize it and change, you know, fix it.
Exactly. There's that when I worked at an agency, Veronica just jumped on to say hi. Hi, Veronica. When I worked in an agency, one of our favorite like little internal videos to share with each other was always the pivot scene from Friends where they're just shouting pivot. Like, quick, do it, get it on there.
That's a good video. I need to pull that clip and just
oh my gosh, that clip is so overused just for that one, like, for that one scene, because it's so important. You're like, oh my gosh, I've got to pivot, and it's such a monumental thing. But sometimes it's bigger in our heads than actually once we do it.
That's so true. Very good point.
Right. So from your own personal experience, what have you seen why is it important to face those fears, right? Because those fears that you talked about they can be extraordinary in the amount of space they can take up in your head, right? When you're trying to figure out the right direction, it can become paralyzing. What is the benefit of actually just moving forward and then planning to have that flexibility to pivot later?
Yeah. Well, so I think that's been one of the biggest things that I've tried to make sure I do. You know, the past 2 years, I made it like my own personal mission to face my fears. Anytime my head tells me, no, don't do it, I do it. You have to, you know, because you're holding yourself back. And, you know, as the past 2 years, I started changing that and started doing those things that scared me. That I did begin to realize how much they held me back. And, you know, I ended up missing out on quite a few opportunities that could have been monumental. And so, you know, when you don't face those fears, you are now holding yourself back and you're filling yourself with this energy that can in turn now move forward in your whole life. It'll start to build in different aspects, from your life to your business to you as a leader and as an individual. So we have to start facing our fears at the end of the day, because it just makes us better individuals, and it just makes us realize, you know, it wasn't as bad as we thought it was when you do kind of face it, you know?
That's absolutely true. It's funny you say that while you were talking. I was thinking about a couple of years ago, I read a book called The Year of Saying Yes by Shonda Rhimes, which is never a book or anything that I would normally read, but I'm in this reading group and have to read books by every category. So I was like, fine, I'll read it. Oh my gosh, it was so good. Like, it was just so inspiring, because having to say yes to everything, no matter how much it scares you, is monumental by the end because of the transformation that you can find. So, when you are talking to different entrepreneurs, and obviously this would be offline conversations, not the ones you're putting in front of everybody. But what are you seeing people who are afraid to push past those fears? And are you seeing people, what are some of the things that you're seeing when they're not willing to do that, or able to do that, or able to just get past that space in their head to do that?
I think it goes back to even in what I noticed when I wasn't facing those fears. You know, you do end up missing out on a lot of opportunities. And it can affect so many different things in your life. I have also realized, as I've talked to these entrepreneurs, that it really is up to them and their time. You know, I can give them advice and I can tell them to just go and do it, but it really is up to them. And once they're ready to kind of take that leap. Nowadays, I do see a change with entrepreneurs, because I do see this community really evolving and working together. You know, people are now talking more about these fears out loud with each other. Before, you don't do that. You know, before, everything's perfect. My business is amazing. And, you know, I just sold, like, you know, I just got 10 new clients. And the reality most of the time is not that, especially in the beginning. You know, some days I worry about how are we going to pay our bills. You could end up losing a really big client, and that's the one thing I am seeing a change is these entrepreneurs are now being vocal, at least with each other, to just get advice, and hopefully that advice also motivates them to take that leap and face those fears.
Absolutely. And having that support group is so important, especially if you're working from home, because
yes.
my dog doesn't always answer my questions the way I want him to.
I have common conversations as well with my dog. But,
Yeah. But that actually takes us to the third section, advice for new entrepreneurs. And that's something that, once again, you've talked to so many plus your own experience. What advice do you wish someone had given you when you were first starting out?
Yeah, so I have a couple. Be extremely mindful of the team that you're building. We can't do this all alone. We definitely need help, but we also need to make sure that we are bringing in the right kind of help. You need to take this time to really evaluate the people that you are partnering with or that you are bringing with your team, just so that you can really build a strong foundation within the team itself. There's also, what do they say? They always say, hire slow, fire fast. And that's something along with that, you need to keep in mind. If you bring in somebody and they look great and you think they're going to do a great job, or they're a friend and they're helping you out, but they're really not cutting it, you may not want to hurt their feelings, or you may think that they're going to learn, but in reality, that's going to slow things down. That could create conflicts within the team itself already. So be mindful of the team that you're building. Understand the value that you bring and that your company is bringing. I get so many inquiries about people, wanting to partner and build a partnership. And partnerships are good, but you as the individual, when you're getting offered a partnership, you need to make sure that you understand the value that you're bringing, because you can in turn almost end up overworking for that. And it may not be an equal balance between that partnership, because, you may think you're not big enough to be their partner. So you'll work 10 times harder, and then the return is better for them and not for you. So really understanding the value that you bring and that your company brings is key. The other one is learning to say no, which I am still struggling with this. The one thing I read before was that it takes more courage to say no than yes. Saying yes is the easiest thing you can do. And if we learn to start saying no, we're going to be able to better protect ourselves from making poor decisions. And I got to practice that still. I want to help everybody. I want to, that's what we do at DCN. We're here for entrepreneurs. We want to provide them a voice. But if I start doing so many things outside that's not focusing on DCN won't be here to really be able to do what we're going to do. So it's always that reminder of, okay, Adelia, go back in, focus, get DCN up and running, get us stable, get us to doing what we're doing, because then I can help anybody, and I'll have the time to. But right now, we all just have to focus on our companies and ourselves and what we're doing, so that we can do even more down the road.
That's absolutely true. And that advice is fantastic. All of those things are so important. I'm like, while I was listening to you, I was like, it's so important. Every single one, especially, from building your team, from partnering. But I think that the last one, if you don't do the third piece of advice you're not going to have a chance to do the first two.
No, exactly. Yep, there you go. Oh, I should change that.
No, but it's true, because I know there's so many cannabis events, right?
Yeah.
There's so many. You could be networking every single day of the week. And as part of that, if you're not trying to, just from networking alone, not even meetings, not even calls, not even client pitches, not even anything else, just from networking alone, you won't have time to actually work on your business.
No. That's the hardest thing, I think, too, because there's so much going on and you want to be a part of it. Mm-hmm. But that's one of the things. You have to say no to every event. You have to make sure that, does it bring value, or do you just want to see your friends, or do you just want to, it's making sure that it's going to bring you new leads. If you've already seen these people at the past 5 events, you probably don't need to go to this next one if it's the same people. You need to get outside of that and get to a new circle and meet new people for your business to flourish. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I know, right? But sometimes I just want to see my friends too.
I know. That's the thing too, because we're always working. So there was one more I actually thought of that I wanted to make sure I said too is, and I think it's because of how people present the cannabis industry. And, everybody says the green rush, which I absolutely hate, honestly. I don't know. It's one of my pet peeves. I don't like that word, but, you're not going to be an overnight success in any startup, but especially the cannabis industry. It is I think, one of the hardest industries to start a business right now. Even though people are saying there's going to be so much money or there's so much money in it right now, it's not. If you even look at like companies like Amazon and Yahoo, it took them at least 3 years to become big. And the majority of companies, it takes about 10 years. Mm-hmm. So the payoff will be there, but it's not going to happen tomorrow, and it takes a lot of time. So if you're trying to get rich quick, I think you need a second guess coming into the space, to be honest. Yeah, exactly.
My advice to you, if you're trying to get rich tomorrow, pivot. No, I think that's all really important because people, and part of that is prioritization and setting your expectations, right? Like I know that even just and I've been working a long time and I've always been one to okay, my list is going to be 10 times bigger than what I'm going to be able to accomplish, but I can get through it. And it's definitely required a lot of, a pretty steep learning curve in terms of just prioritizing, making sure that all of those things, I think building the priorities in the right way is the first step. Yeah. To your point earlier, because it's easy to start trying to do everything and think you can do it all at once.
Yeah. You want to. I have high hopes every day, but I get a reality check every day. I'm not the superwoman I want to be.
But then my internet's not working quite the way I want it to.
Yeah. You spill coffee on your laptop and you're out.
Exactly. Those of you guys who are watching, if you have any questions for Adelia, please feel free to put them in the comments. And if you're watching the replay, thanks for watching. Be sure and put your comments in. We'll be responding to those as well. So I do have one more thing about advice because I just think this section is so important. And I say one thing, but I think I really mean 2 or 3. So bear with me. Okay. And first of all, Veronica, I just dragged it to the front because I love the software program. She was saying that it's good tips, practical advice. Thank you. This is her first time on Facebook Live. And look, now your comments in the screen too. Good job. Thanks. Thanks for being here. So when it comes to advice, everyone has it, right? Especially when you're starting your own business. There are more topics and books and podcasts and articles for new entrepreneurs and, just general entrepreneurs, right? Not even in the cannabis space, but just general entrepreneurship. Was there any advice that someone gave you that, one, I know there's a lot of bad advice, so there's that, but that you actually listened to that you wish you hadn't?
So looking at that question,
it's a tough question. I know.
Yeah.
So you can flip it if you want.
I honestly couldn't think of anything. I think whenever I do get advice, I really analyze it completely. I think that's one thing, especially if you're going through a stressful time, you may just jump at the first advice you hear. But that is one thing I've trained myself to be really good on is really listening to the advice and then going back and sitting on it and looking at where that advice is being presented. If it's for my business, I really look at it and see, will this really help the company? Talk to your team about it and listen to your gut. If that advice, does sound bad, you probably shouldn't do it just yet. Or, even advice that I have gotten, I really couldn't think of anything that in turn I would blame that advice for, because at the end of the day, I take it in and then I reconstruct it to working for the company in my own way. And even when I've utilized advice I've read and it's actually failed, it's not a bad thing. I'm realizing we have to fail and you're going to fail all the time. It's how do you react when you fail? So, yeah, I honestly didn't have a really strong response for that question.
No, but I think that's really good because you said something that is perfect, right? So it's taking advice in and filtering it through the lens of what you need and your priorities for your business, because everyone's going to have advice, including us. Everyone's going to have advice in terms of what you should do, and it's one of those things where you can take it all in, but you need to be able to apply it to yourself. And in order to do that, you need to figure out, ask yourself those questions Adelia mentioned in terms of what's right for your business. Is it going to be a good fit? Is it going to send you in the direction you want to go in and help you reach those goals that you're trying to accomplish? And so I think that even though the question itself didn't apply, the answer you gave is perfect, because that filter is so, so important. I tried to trick you.
You made me think about it, and I couldn't.
No, but I think that's important because it's really true. So on the topic of advice, actually, Andrea is here, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name right, is here, and she has a very fantastic comment about Adelia, which I just put on the screen. So just commenting on her support of her clients. So Adelia, awesome job. There's a great compliment here for you about how supportive you are and how awesome you are in creating your network. So thank you, Andrea.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
That's great. So you mentioned the 3 things that are really important for cannabis entrepreneurs. And I know that there's a lot of just the basic things in terms of knowing your goals and what your direction is, having your business plan. Like there's the practical list that you can get in terms of activities. But I think that what the 3 things that Adelia mentioned are actually bigger than that. And it's how you're going to approach your business in the cannabis industry. So when you take those 3 things that you mentioned, right, hiring and the other 2, partnerships, how do you apply them to the cannabis industry? Is there anything specific that you would look at it through that lens for, that you would add to that?
So
Am I not being good?
Maybe I'm not understanding it.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure. I've been trying to. So it's when you're looking at partnerships and hiring, and the third one you mentioned, sorry, off the top, what was the third one?
No. You learn to say no.
Oh yeah, that one. Actually, we already answered that question. Sorry about that. I'm just going to keep going because I think your advice is good. I want to leave it the way it is, and stop trying to trick you. But I do have a couple of speed round questions for you.
Cool. Okay.
Okay. So first of all, and I don't know if you can answer this because you have a whole network and you work with a ton of entrepreneurs and promote their products and their services a lot. So if you can't answer it, feel free to just decline. But what is your favorite cannabis product?
Well, first things first, I love joints. I'm a flower kind of girl. And I will, it's, yes, I'm a part of DCN and we do support so many different brands and companies, but I also have my favorite kind of products that I like. So, my favorite joints, right now, one would be, it's by a farm called Original Hog's Breath Family Farm. They're actually in Southern California. You, I believe, actually know them. And, I also like Lowell's Farms. And then my favorite brand, which I haven't had in a while, is actually called the Hepburns. It's made by an amazing woman, and she just creates this amazing joint that's like rolled in scissor hash and all this magic. And it's, one of my favorite joints ever. But I love joints, so.
Perfect. So indica, sativa, or both, or hybrid?
I'm more a sativa or hybrid, or a sativa dominant hybrid. Especially when, out working or out at networking events, it just keeps me going. And the only time I really enjoy indica is when I need to turn my brain off, when I need to go home and actually try to sleep, because I'm always on the go. I'm always working, and, I do have to sleep sometimes. So indica helps me, kind of calm down, chill out, and
check
fall
that
asleep.
off. Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I hear you on that. So I know I've run into you at many, many networking events and conferences in LA, San Diego, Vegas. What are your favorite networking events or conferences that you would recommend for entrepreneurs?
The biggest one is, which is actually in November, is the MJ BizCon. And that is, I would say that is one of the biggest conference that everybody should attend because everybody in the cannabis space from around the world is there. So it's your chance to finally meet those people that you want to meet, that you've been talking to online. Every year I go, I'm finally connecting with individuals that I've talked to only on email. And it feels like you already know them just because we have online, Facebook, all that. But that's a great one. New West Summit, which is more on my end. I love just because it's focused on tech and startups. That one I believe is I'm drawing a blank, September or October, maybe October. And that'll be in NorCal. And it's a really good conference. There's a lot, but those are my two that I would say definitely check out. If you are looking for events, I'm going to totally do a shout out right now.
Please do. Please do.
Check out Event High, eventhigh.io. It's actually my fiance's company, so
It's like your 35 minutes to throw it out there. Good
yeah. Right? I'll be honest, I am shouting it out, but it actually is. It's a platform where you can find all kinds of cannabis events. So it's actually pretty cool. I will say that. Not just because I think he's a cool guy. It's
and
actually
I'm not engaged to him, and I can tell you it's a cool site.
There we go.
Oh, thank you. Andrea just mentioned that New West Summit is in Oakland in October.
Perfect. Good.
So thank you for those details. And I'll add the links to the show notes as well. So that way, if you're interested in learning more, I'll put both of those on there too. So you have them if you're watching the replay. Okay. One last question for you, Adelia. Where can people find you if they want to connect?
First thing, go to directcannabisnetwork.com. If you are a business and actually wanting to get on our business directory, you can actually email contact@directcannabisnetwork.com. And if you're more on social, you can follow me. It's at Miss Adelia, and Direct Cannabis Network is @_DC Network _. That's a lot, but hopefully we can put it down in the info.
Yeah, I just had the Facebook and Instagram links up, and we'll add the rest in your notes, in the show notes as well. Cool. Perfect. Awesome. There's a few people here. If you have any quick questions, get them in before. Otherwise, we'll check the comments and answer those questions. But Adelia, thank you so much for your time today. It was great. Your advice was awesome as always. It's so great to see you.
Yes.
And I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you everybody for tuning in, and hopefully I'll see you guys all soon.
Absolutely. And for you guys, next week we'll be talking about event marketing with Courtney Freeman. Sorry. It's been that kind of day. Courtney Freeman. We'll be here next week, 2 p.m. PST. Great job. Nice to see you, Adelia. And we will see you guys next week. Thank you for watching. Bye.